con ustedes y un fuerte aplauso, muy fuerte aplauso para Dane Rauschenberg.
Thank you, everybody. It is absolutely fantastic to be here. It's also wonderful to have a translator because I don't speak much Spanish and I felt like the stupidest person in Ecuador the past 2 days. I went for a run earlier. I keep expecting people to have subtitles underneath them when they speak. It hasn't popped up yet. I went for a run this morning. I learned 2 separate things. One, even the dogs speak more Spanish than I do, which is kind of humbling. And then apparently I look a lot like Novak Djokovic, the tennis player, because I got a lot of points and stares. So it was a wonderful introduction. I appreciated that. What I have become known for was running 52 consecutive weekly marathons back in 2006. When people hear that, they automatically assume that I've been running my entire life, and that running is something that came easily to me. So this is something that obviously I could do, or that I had been planning for many years. What couldn't be further from the truth is anything that has any idea around the fact that I was planning to run this for years and years. I did not like to run at all when I was growing up. I thought running was punishment. It was what you do when you drop the ball when you're playing around, or when you're goofing around. Your people tell you to go for a run around the lap. Running was a horrible sport. You ran around for hours around the same loop. I was like, you know what, I could do that just by sitting directly right here. I grew up as a swimmer in my hometown in Titusville, Pennsylvania. I liked swimming a lot. Decided that I would take that up as a sport when I became into high school. And when I got my varsity letter, which was I achieved the highest level that you can get in high school, in my hometown, the varsity letter itself wasn't exactly the thing that we liked the most. The thing that everyone coveted was this really ugly brown hat that said Titusville Rockets, which was our mascot. And then whatever sport you got your varsity letter in, we got that on the bottom of it. So it's a Titusville Rockets swimming. So when I got that swimming letter, I asked my mother to send me, go down and give me one of these Titusville Rockets swimming hats. And she said, sure thing. So she went downtown, she came back, she opened up a package, put it on the table, I ripped it open, and it said Titusville Rockets, track and field. I was like, Mom, you bought the wrong hat. And she says, well, I'm sorry about that. I guess I can take it all the way back downtown if I have to. I mean, if you're gonna make me go all the way back downtown, I'll get a different hat. I said, no, keep the hat. I'll run track. So that's why I started running track, because my mom bought the wrong hat. I started running a little bit in high school, just a little bit. I was a decent track guy, but nothing much. My high school team was fantastic though. And what that taught me back then was you can be part of something bigger without necessarily being a standout yourself. And not just about that in athletics, but anything in life. If you're an integral part of something bigger, you're just as important as the star. When I graduated from high school, the only thing that I ever wanted to do was to play American football at the collegiate level, at the university level. 2 days before I started college, I was playing around with some friends and I shattered my collarbone. For the next 2 years, I wasn't able to play any sports at all. I couldn't try out for anything. By the time my 3rd year of university came around, I was able to finally give it a shot and try out for the football team. Went through the process, got to the final cut, and I got cut. Didn't make the team. But the rugby coach for the university had wisely positioned himself right outside the tryout area. And as we walked by, all sad and dejected, he asked us all if we wanted to play rugby. He could have said, do you want to play badminton? And I would have said yes at that point. I had no idea that rugby was American football without any pads, or I don't think I would have tried out. I played rugby for 2 years at college, and on that team, we were 2nd in the United States both years that I played. But just like my high school track team, where I was just a small part in a bigger machine, that was how this university rugby team went for me. I was a small part of this machine, but it led to something greater. After after I graduated from university, I figured athletics were done. If you're not getting paid to play professionally, there's no room for athletics in life. You've got to grow up, is what I thought I had to do, get a job. I went to grad school to study to be an attorney. When I was in grad school, when I decided I needed to lose a little bit of weight. I was a much bigger guy than I am now. I weighed about 50 pounds more than I do now when I played rugby. I was a big guy. So I thought, how can I lose weight? Swimming was the thing that I knew the most to do, but finding a time when I could go find a pool that would fit into my schedule was pretty difficult. So just then, a really pretty girl in one of my law school classes went running by, and I thought, you know what? I can get in shape, and I can ask her out on a date. That's what I'll do. So, saw her the next day in class. I said, hey, Christy, would you like to go for a run this weekend? She's like, I'd love to. So I said, well, what time would work for you? And she said, well, how about in the morning? I said, of course, absolutely. So about 10 in the morning? She's like, no, I was thinking about 6. Who gets up at 6 in the morning to go exercise? That's a horrible idea. I think I finally talked her into running somewhere around 8 or so. Well, we started running. I didn't know that Christy had qualified for and was in the middle of training for the Boston Marathon. My very first training partner was someone who's going to the Pinnacle Marathon in the United States. We went for a run, I think it was about 5 miles, and I was ready to die. I thought, this is unbelievable. We started training more and more together, and I finally said, you know what, let's go for a double-digit run next weekend. I would like to go past 9 miles. I'd like to go well in. She said, sure thing. So she's like, I'll pick you up. I said, okay. We usually ran to wherever we were going. So she picked me up, she put a number on my lap, and she said, put that on. And I said, what? She's like, I signed us up for a half marathon this morning. And I said, you did what? When? She's like, you can do it, it's not a problem. She's like, it's just 3 more miles than you thought that you could do. Run with me, I'll teach you how to pace and run an even effort. I said, okay. So we went out, we ran this half marathon, and it was a great day. I had a wonderful time, I ran perfectly in pace with her, and then at the last couple of miles, she said, you've got more energy, go ahead. So I took off, had a wonderful time. Started training a little bit longer with her, doing a little bit longer runs. And I said, you know what, if I'm going to be doing these long runs, I need a goal. So I said, I'll sign up for my first marathon. Well, I signed up for a marathon, but life got in the way, as it often does. I couldn't run that race. So I waited another year to run this marathon. But during that time, I barely trained. I was in my 3rd year of law school, had a lot of obligations. And the longest run that I did was 16 miles. Now, 16 miles is a long run, but not when you're training for 26 miles. I figured, you know what, I'm fine. I played rugby in college. I'll be okay. You know, I had this like attitude, like no one can stop me. Went into this marathon, and my goal was to break 3 hours in the marathon. I knew nothing about running, but I knew the world record was 2 hours and 5 minutes. Who can't break 3 hours is what I thought, you know? For those of you who aren't that great with a 3-hour time period, that's a 6:52-minute mile, or I think under 4 minutes per kilometer, if my math is right. Well, that's a very fast time, okay? That's when I should have never thought that I could do. So I went out and I ran the first half, nice even pace. I ran right under 90 minutes for the first half marathon, perfect pace. I said, you know what? I got these delusions of grandeur. I was going to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated, you know, unsung talent comes out of nowhere. I thought, you know what, I can pick this up. I bet you I can run in the 2:40s if I run this second half really fast. Well, I ran a 2:43 second half. Yeah, the whole marathon was 4 hours and 12 minutes, okay? That's not a bad time at all. But it is when you go out at a 1:29. My body fell apart. My most embarrassing moment in my history of athletics happened about mile 22. I could see the aid station, which had the liquids and the Gatorade, at just down the road, right there. and a guy passed me, and he had a fuel belt on that had all his little drinks in it. And as he went by, I begged him for a drink off of his own fuel belt. That's how pathetic I was. It's like, please, give me a drink. I must have looked so bad because he looked at me, he unhooked the fuel belt, and he handed me the whole thing. He said, take it. You need it more than I do. I had no qualms whatsoever. I took the fuel belt, I put it around my waist, and away I went. I finished the race. I found the guy, and I gave him the fuel belt back, and I said, thank you. I owe that guy a fuel belt because I was really just sucking those things dry. I didn't care what was in them, I needed sustenance. I finished that race, and I said, never again. I am never running a marathon for the rest of my entire life. For the next 2 years, I kept to that. I barely ran at all. I ran a little bit on the weekends. I ran a little bit like during the week with some friends, 3 or 4 miles here and there. Nothing major. I graduated from law school. I took a job clerking for a judge near my hometown. My judge did a search on the internet of my name and found my marathon result. Well, he was a pretty active triathlete. And he said, you know what, I'm going to be running the Erie Marathon in Pennsylvania in a couple of months. I'd like you to train it with me and run it with me. And I said, thank you, Your Honor. I've done my marathon. I'm done with running it. And he said, no, I think you should. And when the judge said things like, I think you should, it was, you will or you're fired or maybe going to jail. So I guess I'm going to run the marathon. Well, we started training together. His schedule intervened, and all of a sudden he couldn't run it anymore. But I had already paid for it. I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to run this race. It didn't go nearly as bad as the first marathon did, but not nearly as good as I had hoped. I didn't swear off marathoning now anymore. I said, let's try another one. But it wasn't another year until I decided to do another. I had moved to Washington, D.C. I was training for the Marine Corps Marathon, which is one of the biggest marathons in the world. But now I was training hard. I was doing these long training runs. I was doing track workouts with friends. I was running on the weekends with fuel belts on and doing these 3-hour runs. And I said, you know what? I am going to crush my personal best. And I'm going to kill this thing. Well, I didn't kill it. In fact, I got slower. And I said, what is going on? You know what? Maybe I should stick to the half marathons because I do really well in the first half, but I don't do well in the second half. But I had inexplicably signed up for another marathon 3 weeks later. I don't remember signing up for it. I just remember that I was signed up for it. People say, how do you stay so motivated? Is it something your parents instilled in you? Was it something that you've learned over time? I said, no, it's money out of my pocket, okay? You pay for a race, I guarantee you are going to run it. So with this marathon, I went, everything should have been horrible. It was only 3 weeks after the last marathon. Who runs 2 marathons in 3 weeks? Nobody, I thought. So I said, let's give it a shot. I went out and I ran 10 minutes faster than I had ever run before. I ran a 3:19 for my marathon time. I said, okay, well maybe I shouldn't quit running just yet. I decided to run another marathon about a month and a half later. I went to Phoenix, Arizona. I had no goals. I thought, let's just go out there and give this a shot, see what we can do. I dropped another 10 minutes off my previous personal best and qualified to run in Boston. I said, all right, well, let's keep this up. Over the next 5 weeks, I scheduled another marathon every 2 weeks. I ran them all faster than I had previously run them. Now, I was realizing I was never going to be the super fast marathoner that I had delusions of grandeur about back during my first marathon. But for some reason, I was really able to run really well on little rest. Little recovery was needed for me to get up and get on the starting line again. They normally say that you need lots of amounts of time in between marathons to have a peak performance. But here I was running faster every single race. Now, I'm giving you a little bit of background. So now you can hear I've got about 6 marathons under my belt. And for some reason, I've only been running for 2 years. I figured with 6 marathons under my belt, why not try to run a marathon every weekend for an entire year? That's gotta be easy, right? So you're now caught up to speed on how inexperienced I was, and honestly, I'm happy that I was. Because if I knew then what I know about running now, I would have never attempted 52 marathons in 52 weekends. Because I was told it's not possible. You can't go out there and do that. And so what I like to really impart upon everyone is that you should ignore the impossible. The impossible, whether you can do it or not, you will find out. You will find out eventually whether you can. But you might as well try your best on the way. On top of these 52 marathons, what I wanted to do was run them as fast as I possibly could. On top of running all of those marathons in 1 year, I thought, you know what? Let's see if I can run this difficult. Let's see if I can run these fast. Because I was no longer worried about simply completing a marathon. I had done that. I had finished 6 marathons. Now I wanted to run as fast as I could. So my goal was to run them all under 4 hours, which I thought would be a tough enough goal, but maybe one that I could complete. Well, up until the 26th marathon, I had done just that. The midpoint of the year, the exact middle of the year, I had run under 4 hours in every single marathon. But the 26th marathon of the year, there was only 1 marathon in all of North America that I could get to. And I say that I could get to because I was still working a full-time job while I was running these 52 marathons. I was just like everybody else. I had a job, I had obligations, I had a life. So I had to be back to work every Monday morning. So I couldn't just take off and fly to Australia or down here to Ecuador and find a marathon that fit. I had to find one somewhere close to home. So the only one that I could find was in Leadville, Colorado. For those of you who don't know the topography of the United States, Leadville is the highest city in North America. It sits at 10,000 feet above sea level, a little under 2 miles above sea level. The race starts there and goes up. There is 12,000 feet of up and down through this race. It tops out at 13,000 feet above sea level. My goal to run under 4 hours in this race was slim to none, okay? There was very little opportunity that was going to happen. I looked at the previous year's results. The only guy who ran under 4 hours, his name was Anton Krupicki. I didn't know this then, but I do now, that he's one of the United States' greatest ultra-marathoners, and he's the only one who broke 4 hours in this race. On top of that, he also lives in Leadville, which I think is cheating, okay? I'm not going to, there's no suspense. I didn't break 4 hours, okay? I didn't break 5 hours. I averaged a 3:20 for all 52 marathons that I ran. A 3 hour and 20-minute marathon was my average time that year. At Leadville, I ran 5 hours and 17 minutes. That's how hard that race is. To put it in perspective, I was still in the top 50 finishers with that time. In fact, I was the only person east of the Rocky Mountains who finished in the top 50. So one of my goals to run under 4 hours was now dashed. I said, you know what though? It's all downhill from here. The next to the last weekend of the year posed the biggest problem. You see, it was 51st weekend was the weekend of Christmas. Well, there were no marathons in North America. There were no marathons in the world. And I said, well, what am I going to do? I said, well, of course there's no marathon, it's Christmas. But I said, you know what, that's pretty myopic. There are like 4 billion people who don't celebrate Christmas. Where's the great Jewish marathon, you know? Maybe there's one in Israel. And I looked, you know, there wasn't. So to keep the streak alive, because that's what this wasn't just 52 marathons. It wasn't just 52 marathons under 4 hours, hopefully. It was 52 marathons every single week. So at any point in the year, if I didn't make a marathon, the whole year was kaput. So I had to either find one, which was showing that I could not do, or I had to make one. So I became the race director of the first annual Drake Well Marathon in my hometown. The Drake Well is the first working oil well in the history of the planet. And it's 1 mile from my home. It's now dry, but it's the place where the oil industry was born. So I named the marathon after the most popular thing about my hometown. Very small town, 5,000 people. The race itself was very small. I made it a very personalized race. The Drake Well silhouette is well known in the area. So we made the finishers medals that were given to all the runners a wood-carved silhouette of Drake Well that my father carved for every single runner. We then took these medals down to a local jeweler, put a plaque on the front, and embroidered their name on the front of it. So when you finished, you got a hand-carved medal with your name on it. We only had 25 people in this race, for some of the reasons that I mentioned and some I'm about to. We had very personalized aid stations. We treated every runner like they were an Olympic athlete. Whatever they wanted in their box that had all their drinks and all their foods, we would give to them. And this makes it a little bit difficult. How do you get these boxes to all these runners all over the course? Well, that was the part that made it simple. I put these aid station boxes in lane 7 because the Drake Well Marathon was 1.5 laps around my high school track. 105 times around is what this marathon was. Let that sink in. Sounds awful. But it wasn't, because one of the hardest things about the marathon is the unknown. You don't know if there's going to be a hill at mile 21. You don't know where your aid stations are going to be. You don't know what's going to happen with everything. Well, with this particular race, you knew where everything was. It was right on that track. The guy who finished dead last said, you know what, this was my most favorite marathon ever. And I said, you're pulling my leg. He says, no, I was always only like 400 meters away from the guy who was winning. And I felt like I could catch him. I didn't want to break it to him when he was about 30 laps behind the guy, but that's okay. As long as he liked the race, that's fine. When I finished that 51st marathon, I only had 1 more to go, and it was really anticlimactic. I landed in Springfield, Missouri, right in the heart of America, ran that race, and the year was done. I broke down a little bit when I finished that race. I cried a little bit because I was like, I figured that I had just completed what was the most challenging, difficult thing I would ever do in my life. And I was a little sad. Because I said, what can I possibly do to top this? What could I do that would be better than this? I walked back to my hotel. I had a call waiting for me from London. The BBC radio news wanted to talk to me about what I had just done. We talked for a little while, and they said, hey, so what's next? And I said, really? What's next? I just finished the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I haven't even showered yet, and you're asking me what's next? And that's when I realized that he was saying what I had just said to myself. You know, I just said, well, how am I going to top this? And I realized that, you know what? I don't have to top this. No one can ever take this away from me. I set my own goals. I set my own agenda. Don't let anyone else set your agenda for you. Now, granted, I've gone and done some other things since then. As was mentioned, last year, I ran 350 miles in 7 days along the coast of Oregon. Doing a lot of what I'm doing right now, I would stop during the day to talk to kids about chasing their dreams, ignoring the impossible. Going out there, putting one foot in front of the other, not just in athletics, but in life, to see what you can do. I had never run about 5 or 6 miles, hand off to the teammate, and then 12 people later, they'll run again. So they run about a total of 13 to 18 miles, depending on how long their legs are. Well, I had been in talks with someone about doing something like this, but I thought I'd take it up a notch. I wasn't trying to best what I had done with the 52 marathons, but I wanted to try something different. So instead of getting 11 teammates together for this 202-mile race, I decided I would run it all by myself. My goal was to run 202 straight miles from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. I didn't know if it was possible. People said, do you think you can do this? I go, I have no idea. I had never run more than 87 miles straight. And that was in a 100-mile race that I had to drop out of because of heat exhaustion. So I said, you know what? Left, right, left. That's the only way you can guarantee anything in life, is by moving forward. My goal was to run it in 65 hours, give or take, non-stop. We finished it nearly 2 days after we started. It took me 50 hours, 16 minutes, and 58 seconds. For all intents and purposes, having never run more than 87 miles straight before, I ran 101 miles on back-to-back days. Blew 10 furthest distances ever run by an American in 12 hours. But I didn't know that at the time. If I had, all the things that I've done since then would have made a lot more sense. But it wasn't until many years later that I went back and looked. It's been 10 years since that race was run. No one has come within 7 miles of how far I ran. Now I tell you these things not to brag. I'm not trying to say, hey, look how awesome I am. Look how great Dane is, right? I tell you these things to give you an idea of what I've been able to lay down. And what I love about the sport of running is it's very humbling. It's hard to have a big ego when there's always a clock ticking down. If you run this time, and this girl runs faster than you, and this guy runs slower than you, well, that's where you are. There's no teammates to blame. That is your time. You can say, I didn't work hard enough, or maybe I had a bad day, but you can't blame anyone else. And because that is what your time is, it's very humbling. I'm very, very pleased with the things that I've done in my life, but I also know I have friends who can do amazing things as well. But that doesn't stop me from going out there and trying new and challenging things. I fly home tomorrow. I land at 11 p.m. 6 hours later, I have to be back at the airport because I'm flying to the Midwest. There is a state called Wisconsin in the United States. And there's a very small town. It's got about 700 people in it. And its name is Dane. I'm going to run from Dane in Wisconsin to Davenport in Iowa. It's 150 miles. I'm going to do it over 3 days. Each day I'm going to stop and talk to kids the same way I did during the Oregon run. Then when I finish this 150-mile run, I'm going to run a marathon. It's a cool down. But unlike things that I've done in the past where I've been able to space them out and see what I can do to challenge myself, I'm going to be doing these 150 miles, and I'm going to be running that marathon, hopefully as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to go out there and try to qualify again for the Boston Marathon. The reason I tell you about that event and the ones that I've done is because I want to come back to the same point, which I tried to say many times, is my theme in life is to ignore the impossible. I very much like to see, we hear all the time that we tell children, you can do anything you want. And honestly, I don't believe that. There are a lot of things we can't do. I cannot dunk a basketball, okay? I've got no jumping ability whatsoever. But the way I found out about that was by trial and error. Continually trying, continually failing. And failure is an integral part of our lives. We often sometimes see it as something that's very bad. Failure is fantastic. We learn very little from success. If you always succeed, you would think that you always know what you're doing. When the truth is, we often have no idea what we're doing. We learn as we go. I've run 145 marathons now, which is a little bit more than the one that I said I was going to stop at. As I've run those 145 marathons, I've learned the more I run, the more I learn, the less I actually know. I learn just as much from beginning runners as I do the elites and the greats. You know, I'm constantly a sponge. What I've done in life has allowed me the fortuitous opportunity to speak with and hang out with some of the greatest runners that America has ever produced. And by listening to them and learning, I see how humble they are and how non-elitist they are, because they grasp this too. These are people that used to run the fastest times in the world. Now that they're a little bit older, they no longer can do that. And they grasp how fleeting athleticism is, and how lucky you are to be able to do what you do. Often we hear things about how I have to go for a run today, or I have to go for a swim, or I have to do this, or I have to do that.
My father, right before I was born, was crippled in a hunting accident. He was unloading a .357 Magnum and it went off into his leg and blew away most of his leg. He passed away last year, complications from a different illness. But throughout his life, he never once complained about that leg. And I knew he was in excruciating pain all the time. But he dealt with that pain and he continued to do things. I came home once from college and we had a new fountain in our yard that looked like it had been created by nature. Rocks and a water fountain and all these waterfalls going down. And I said, where did that come from? My dad said, your mom and I built it. I'm like, you and mom did. My mother had rheumatic fever when she was a child. She was bedridden for about 3 years when she was growing up. My mom has had 2 open heart surgeries and has an aortic valve replacement in her heart now. My mother with the fake heart and my dad with the crippled leg built a waterfall in our front yard. When I hear people complain about the little things that go wrong in their life, I think back to that. I think back to I have to go for a run. I have to go for a swim. No, you don't have to. No, you do not. You get to. And it's easy to remember that part about I have to. It's easy to forget that you get to. Earlier this year, I had a staph infection in my foot. I came this close to losing my foot. Not that I needed the reminder, because of what I think. I look at my parents and I look at what they've overcome. But that reminder helped me. You know what? I had some goals this year that had to be pushed away because I lost a lot of training because of this foot. And yeah, I'm sore sometimes. And yeah, I've got to go out there and push through some pain. But I get to do that. I get to put on a pair of shoes and go out there. And that's why it bothers me so much when I see people, including people that are close to me, that are out of shape from their own choices. Because health and wellness is a choice for most of us. You can choose to exercise. You can choose to eat properly. And the two go hand in hand. People often ask me for what's the magic thing that you eat? I go, there is no magic thing. And for everyone, it's completely different what you eat. We all know what to do. Put down the Cheetos, put down the Doritos, you know. You can have some every once in a while. Believe me, I do, okay? But you should be eating properly. A little bit of meat, a little bit of salad, all those good things. So what you should do is make those right choices to be able to do what you want to do. There's a gentleman named Ed Whitlock. He lives in Canada. In his mid-70s, he ran a 2-hour and 53-minute marathon. That is approximately 6:45-minute miles in his mid-70s. I'm sure you all saw about the woman who just swam from Miami to Cuba. Diane Nayad is her name, if I can pronounce it correctly. She was, if I recall, 66 years old. She had failed in this attempt to swim from Miami to Cuba 4 times. She finally completed it. And she said, you know what you need to do is always be pushing forward. So if you take anything from me tonight, and I hope it's not that I think that I'm so special. In fact, I think I'm just like the rest of you. I just happened to find what I was good at, and I went for it. So I hope if you get anything, is that you should constantly strive forward. You know the secrets to do the things that you want to do. You know the things that you shouldn't do that are stopping you. So go out there, stop doing the things you're not supposed to do. Start doing the things that you will, and you'll succeed. You have a litany of wonderful speakers here telling you about the scientific results of what they've looked at. These are people that have done the things that they wanted to do to get to where they are. I gave up what I was thinking that I wanted to do at one point. I was interviewing to be in the CIA, believe it or not. I decided during the 52 marathons that running was what I wanted to do. Back to that final marathon of those 2006, when I thought there's nothing I can do to top this. I've learned that I can, but it has nothing to do with me. It's going out there and spreading this message of challenging yourself. What I did that day wasn't all that special. When I finished those 52 marathons, that was fine. But what it opened up for me was the opportunity to be right here. This is the thing that motivates me every day. People say, how do you stay motivated? It's because I get the opportunity to meet and talk with people like yourselves every day. And when I say yourselves, I mean by myself as well. We're the same. Hopefully you've done what you wanted to do in life, but if you haven't, it's never too late. You can always go out there and strive for more. So again, if you take anything from me, I really hope that you just go out there, starting today, and say, you know what? I'm going to ignore the impossible. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.